Cathie, Andrew, thank you very much for your time. It's great to have you as a couple together on the lounge in front of the camera.
There is a real wife here.
There is you guys. We've actually talked to each other about each other, but it's good to have you both at the same time. And we're talking about church planting as a couple. When you planted together, what was your experience of doing that, particularly as a couple? What sort of burdens did you carry together? Maybe which ones did you hold separately?
Yep. So a few things. I think isolation and that coming away from family and friends and coming to a new place where we didn't know anyone. So it was just us two. That was a burden, and we had to rely a lot on each other. And for a while, I think being in a position where people are checking out our church, not necessarily trusting it, not wanting to stay, there's a lot of rejecting going on. So I think that's a burden, and I think we found comfort in that with each other. Another was financial pressures, because there's not much money, but at the same time you're going to have to buy a house. Well, we needed to buy a house, and a run-down house at that, and no money to do it up. So that's a pressure that I think we felt. And everything's new, and this is the first time you've ever church planted and you've not done it before because of that. That's a pressure. So you feel like you're making up everything on the run, and steep learning curve, lots of decisions on the fly, lots of big decisions that will impact things long term, huge stresses in that, and then just working out your roles together with a lot of work to be done, and you can't possibly do it all.
And you've got babies.
And
yes.
I'm giving birth regularly.
Well, that's right. You guys had kids at the same time.
Yeah, so we had a little one born and then another one born later, and we already had two little ones. So I think for many people it is often the stage you're also having your family, and that's got its own huge pressures.
Managing sleepless nights, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's right.
Look, it must have been, I was just reflecting on the idea of whether or not people stay or go. It must have been so important to actually be solid with each other at home.
Are you staying?
Yes, the last person you want to have leave the church. Now, was that what you tried very hard to do, to create this safe space at home?
I think we appreciated each other, more, like highly appreciated each other, and found comfort in each other. And I think, and your relationship with God is very important. And I think that resolve and strength, and talking to each other about, look, if this fails, it doesn't matter. But we'll give it a good go. That kind of stuff of, girding each other on was helpful.
Yeah, I don't know that we deliberately created a safe haven. Although, one thing we did try and work at not bringing work into the home all the time. So the work stresses, the work pains and so on. So we tried to create a space where it wasn't out there fighting over all issues and here fighting all that. So we did try and do that. Not always successfully.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what Andrew would have liked. But
more of. Day off, and you're kind of walking somewhere, and
your wife's talking.
This is a chance to talk about the things I've been waiting to talk about.
Well,
and I'm going, no.
This is the thing, isn't it? Because the time that you have to discuss about ministry issues together is often the time when nobody else has got Andrew's ear.
Yeah, that's right. And there is so much happening, and because it is your world, and you're involved in so many things, it is hard to not be talking about it 24/7.
Cathie, can I ask about the things? You talk about all the things you're involved in. One of them was a family. Did you find yourself somewhat distanced from the church planting initially? Because you've got all the kids, you've got lunches, you've got everything you've got to do, bottoms to wipe, the usual sort of thing.
So I think in a sense that is also being involved, because that's doing a lot of the work at home and with kids and so on is enabling Andrew to do stuff. And I was very aware that I actually took on most of the house stuff and most of the housework and all of that in order to free up Andrew a lot. So I was aware that was being involved.
And that is a ministry, so that they are services.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And Andrew kept reminding me of that. So that was good. Like, that was strong in my head. I did want to be very involved physically in the work as well, and so pushed to do as much as I could there. Maybe pushed a little bit too much in terms of the kids were often in creche or quickly in daycare, quickly in situations, so I was freed up. I did move quite quickly in that direction. So I was keen to be involved.
But it does sound like you were self-evaluating there, because even as you say to yourself, maybe I did this too quickly, you're obviously considering all the time my family, plus Andrew, plus the ministry. You sound like you're balancing all those things.
Well, certainly aware. I think there were warning signs. So if kids are jacking up a lot, lots of unsettled kids at home, I think there are warning signs I'm out too much.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, and next time.
It is interesting. There is, if you've got a heart, and this is, Cathie, there's a real passion. So you can't, it's very hard to see needs out there and not be drawn to, I could do something there, I could help there, and be drawn into it and realise the kids who weren't making enough noise. So you have to keep pulling back and forward between these kind of demands all the time and reevaluating, bringing back. And
Now, let me ask you a question on that, particularly for you, Andrew. So on the one side, I guess you're keen to have your wife involved and what areas you see that she's actually particularly gifted at, you want to help her in. But at the other side too, you're trying to help her value the other sort of work she's doing as well. Did you find yourself helping to try and balance and manage?
Yeah, it's less the case now because the kids are older. But in those early years, we had to talk a lot about extensive versus intensive. So, intensive in just the lives of a few kids is ministry. Extensive in the lives of many dozens, hundreds is ministry. But they're both valid, important, appropriate ministries. It's constantly recognising that intensive is not less significant than extensive and keeping them both operating. And so wrestling with that is a constant engagement discussion together. And it is hard too in a climate culturally which says intensive is not as valuable as extensive. So this is where the scriptures bring us back to earth and say, no, every little involvement is a ministry that's significant and valuable and so on and so forth. So we had to keep doing this together.
Because I must admit, like, it sounds all very ideal, but I did struggle with that. I did struggle to value the intensive ministry as much. So I knew it was valuable, but I was very much hankering to do more and more, especially when I could see needs that I could help fill.
Which she could do very well.
But that becomes sinful. So, it was good to have to learn the other.
Can I just say, are you two this eloquent around the kitchen table? Because when you're sort of talking, you actually sound like you thought this through a lot, but I take it must have taken a long time.
It's taken lots of years
to work these things
and we
through.
have thought it through a lot. Yeah, through not doing it well, I think we've had to talk a lot. I will just say...
We do talk like this, didn't we? The kids have these conversations with us all the time.
We're always interrupting each other.
It's kind of fun.
The shape of what I've done has changed. One of the things that I found in the early years too is spending time with school mums and being involved in that way is still being involved. I was saying to Andrew earlier, that's still the Great Commission work. And then now I'm actually involved in staff meetings. That's a different way of doing the Great Commission work. So I think the shape of ministry changes over your years, but the hearts should still be the same.
And there's a giftedness that comes into play too. So that some wives, Cathie's particularly gifted in teaching and connecting and discipling and running ministries. Lots of wonderful gifts there.
But actually, there's external evidence, Cathie. We're not going to deny it because there's too many people who put their hand up.
Yeah. But and I'm on a marriage weekend, so well done.
Slip that one in.
But a Geneva push marriage weekend. But lots of wives, they ought not feel like this is where you need to work together as a couple. Is identifying, how do we each bring to this church plant something that will help facilitate it moving forward? And the partnership will be different depending on the mix of who you both are. And so we ought to be careful not to kind of cast a grid over a person, the wife, and say, this is what you ought to be like because person X is like this. No, you've got to work together to go, how can we both bring what we bring to make this thing go
That's
forward?
a really good question I want to follow up with, because basically there seems to be a debate sometimes like the wife should step back or the wife should be very hands-on, but it's neither, is it? It's actually which is the most appropriate?
A little, there are. We would say there tends to be kind of some broad ends you can tip over into.
Okay.
And within the middle there's room and flexibility. I think the broad end, if you've got a wife who just sees the church plant as his thing and she's pursuing her career, then that's you've tipped over into a problem ministry-wise, actually marriage-wise. There's something deeply wrong going on there. So we would encourage you to be in ministry if that's the way you think about it, because the wife needs to see this as her work together with him. But the other end you can tip over into is, I will only just do the house thing or the family thing. In an early stage of a church plan, a wife, there's so limited resources, you need both involved, not just in the house, but in the church plan. Now, how extensively the wife's involved, you'll work out together. As long as you've both got a heart.
Depending on her capacity and where her gifts lie.
Stage.
You'd also say, Cathie, it's got to do with stage too, because you've actually had very intensely involved points and not so intensely involved points.
Exactly.
It's changed. Can you give us a quick picture of how things have changed for you?
So early days, a big thing that I did, and it was the only thing I could do, was help run the women's Bible study groups, like start it up and oversee that and run it. And that was enough. That filled my week with everything else that I was doing with the kids. Whereas now I'm actually quasi-staff member. So I go to staff meetings. I'm on a couple of ministry teams in our church. And I'm there 5 days, I work 6 days a week.
Probably 50 hours a week in church. Yeah.
Is this the point at which I should actually say to the head of the parish, excuse me, but why aren't you paying this person 50 hours? Anyway,
we're determined not to have Cathie be paid.
Okay, now tell us about that. Why is that?
Well, I reckon, I think I've made the choice, so you can tell your side. We don't need it, and so it helps church that I'm not paid. Andrew's paid enough. We live fine, and so I'm really happy to just work hard because the idea of the money is to pay you to live. We're paid enough to live.
I guess we could wrap up by saying that this has been a long process. One you developed over more than a decade now. What are you coming up to? Almost 2 decades.
Church life.
Yes.
18 years.
18 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you've by now refined it, a process or some ways of actually trying to evaluate each other's needs. How do you actually keep on top of it with each other? How do you keep your conversation going so you understand where the other one's at, whether someone can do more or maybe they're doing too much? How do you evaluate it for each other?
Good question.
Well, when the tears come, there's time to talk.
Oh, good. Now
Your
before
tears.
that, are there occasions when you stop before the tears? Sorry, you were talking about your tears.
Yeah, that's right. When I'm starting to cry, it's time to talk.
Because you would feel it before me quite often, wouldn't you? As me
Cathie,
doing too much.
People need to appreciate we're a particular couple. We're not what everyone is, and so Cathie's got a high capacity. I can be pretty driven, so we can go at pretty hard at things, and so we do. We get a fairly regular day off, and it is an opportunity to sometimes in that context just to take stock and go, look, I just think we're run too ragged. We need to pull back. Where are we going to pull back? And so we don't have a fixed conversation once a month like some people do, and perhaps we ought. But we do keep we keep an eye on it and monitor it, I think, ourselves.
So you monitor more yourselves, or you're each other's keeper?
Well, it's a little bit of both.
It's a mix.
If one of us is flagging, I think the other does say, is this just a one-off, or are you in a situation where you can't get out of this? Like, do we need to talk about this? So you can have a run of late nights and be really exhausted, and you can put up with that for a while, but then one might say, is this a pattern? So we need to address this if this is becoming a pattern. Because there's an awareness. We need quite a few nights off in the week. You can't just keep running out and we certainly need to keep our day off free. So we might accidentally fill it up, or something comes on where we can't do anything about it, but we will hold each other accountable to keeping that day free.
We're pretty honest with each other about, what's happened here, what's gone wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a time to talk and review. Yeah.
Guys, I know actually what you've done is you've given up some of your time off in order to talk to me now. So thanks very much, and thanks on behalf of everybody at Geneva. Look, go and take some time off. Go rest or sleep or run or whatever it is that makes you feel better together.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.